Hi everyone, this is Mr. Castro speaking, and I'm recording this video for my ERWC students. Before you start taking notes on today's lesson, please make sure you have a paper and pencil ready, or if you prefer to type your notes, please make sure you open up a Google Doc or Microsoft Word. If you are typing your notes, I recommend creating a split screen as you see in this example. That way it's easy to take notes as we go through the lesson. You will not have to take notes on everything in this presentation, but when you see this image, that means you should start taking notes on paper, a Google Doc, or Microsoft Word. After today's lesson, you will have an assignment to complete, and you will use your notes to help you. Before you read a given text, you want to survey the text to predict the ATM. ATM meaning audience, topic, and main claim. So you want to look at different parts of the text to help you make these predictions. If you have if you're able to predict the audience, topic, and main claim before you even start reading the text in its entirety, then you will likely be able to gain a better understanding of the text. To help you predict the audience, you want to consider the author, the date, and the source of publication. So you might be able to find the source of publication through the URL. If there's a URL at the very bottom of the page that's given to you, it might be, for example, from Los Angeles Times. Or you might see the source of the publication at the very top of the page somewhere. The date is important because that could help you determine the audience. For example, a speech given to Americans in the year 1950 does not exactly have the same audience as a speech given to Americans now. And looking at the author's background can help you better understand who the author might be trying to inform or persuade. If you do not have background information about the author or you are unaware of the source of publication, you can always Google search the title of the article or speech. To help you determine or predict the topic, consider the title. Oftentimes, you might be able to figure out the title, or not figure out the title, but figure out the topic simply by looking at the title. Lastly, to help you predict the main claim, consider the beginning and the end of the text. That's normally the first two paragraphs and the very last paragraph. A lot of articles and speeches are structured very similarly to an essay in that the main claim is somewhere at the beginning of the text and the main ideas are usually restated at the end. So this is the title of the text that we will take a look at today. The text is "Want to get into college, learn to fail. Students shouldn't stress perfection in college applications." Now, if we look at this title, we might be able to predict the topic. We see some key words in this title: college, fail, perfection, college applications. So we can make various predictions about the topic. This text might be about college applications, might be about perfection and failure among high school students or college students. Now, if we take a look at the very top of the page, we see the source of publication. This article was published originally in Education Week magazine. We also see the date and author. The author was Angel B. Perez, and this article was originally published on January 31st, 2012. So not everyone is familiar with Education Week magazine, and Angel B. Perez isn't exactly a famous person that everyone is familiar with. So let's learn a little bit about the author and the publication. The author, Angel B. Perez, is the Vice President and Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Pitzer College in Claremont, California. He teaches in the College Counseling Certification Program at UCLA. The publication, Education Week, is a magazine published by Editorial Projects in Education, an initiative to improve the nation's schools and colleges. EPE is recognized as a premier source of news, information, and analysis on American pre-collegiate education. So here are some questions you want to consider to help you predict the audience, the possible audience. you want to ask yourself, what are the author's credentials? For example, is the author a doctor, a senator? Is the author a Republican or Democrat? What else do you know about the author? Based on this background that we've been given, we know that Angel B. Perez works at Pitzer College. He's a dean of admission and financial aid. We know that he teaches at UCLA. So because he teaches in the college counseling program at UCLA, and he is the dean of admission at Pitzer College, that gives us an idea of who the possible audience might be. Maybe it's high school students interested in going to college, or maybe it's educators, including teachers and counselors, that are interested in, or not interested, but that are helping their students apply to college. Maybe it's parents who are trying to help their children apply to college. If we look at the source of publication, we find out that Education Week is part of an organization that is designed to improve the nation's schools. And EPE is a major source of news, information, and analysis on American pre-collegiate education, meaning before college. That's what the word pre-collegiate means. So this would include high school education. So now that gives us a better idea of who the possible audience might be. So since Education Week magazine is about pre-collegiate education, and the author is the dean of admission for a college, we can predict that the likely audience would be teachers and high school counselors, since they would likely read Education Week magazine. And the author's background would help him inform and persuade those educators. Lastly, we want to predict the main claim by looking at the first two paragraphs and the last paragraph. So let's go ahead and take a look at these three paragraphs. I ask every student I interview for admission to my institution, Pitzer College, the same question. What do you look forward to the most in college? I was stunned and delighted recently when a student sat across from me at a Starbucks in New York City and replied, I look forward to the possibility of failure. Of course, this is not how most students respond to the question when sitting before the person who can make decisions about their academic futures, but this young man took a risk. You see, my parents have never let me fail, he said. When I want to take a chance at something, they remind me it's not a safe route to take. Taking a more rigorous course or trying an activity I may not succeed in, they tell me I will ruin my chances at college admission. Even the sacrifice of staying up late to do something unrelated to school, they see as a risk to my academic work and college success. That's the first two paragraphs. And in the last paragraph, I smiled as I wrote his words down on the application review form. This kid will thrive on my campus. Not only will the faculty love him, but he has the coping skills he needs to adjust to the rigors of life in a residential college setting. Failure is but growth, learning, overcoming, and moving on. Let's allow young people to fail. Not only will they learn something, it might even get them into college. So taking a look at these three paragraphs, something that grabbed my attention was the word failure and fail. In the first paragraph, we see, I look forward to the possibility of failure. Paragraph 2, you see, my parents have never let me fail. And lastly, in the last paragraph, failure is about growth, learning, overcoming, and moving on. Let's allow young people to fail. It might even get them into college. So putting all of those ideas together, we might be able to predict as the main claim that failure is something that high school students should be allowed to experience because it's something that could help them in college. Now we are going to do something called reading with the grain. Now that we have surveyed the text and we have predicted the audience, topic, and main claim, we are going to read with the grain. We are always reading to gather information for our writing, but sometimes we read to extend our thinking. Good reading should cause you to consider ideas or perspectives that you may not have considered on your own. That is the case in this reading when we are playing the believing game to understand the specific advice Perez offers about how to represent ourselves to an audience. So when we read with the grain, what that means is that we are simply reading a text to understand the author's point of view. I know that oftentimes when you read something, you want to question it and make some connections, but we're simply reading to understand. After we read, if you want to take a second look at it, you will do something called reading against the grain, and that's when you start to question the text. But for now, we're simply reading with the grain, so we're kind of like going with the flow, and we're simply trying to understand the point that Angel B. Perez is trying to make. So we'll go ahead and look at the text, and as we read, take notes on the reasons why the author thinks students should be honest about their failures on college applications.
Want to get into college? Learn to fail. Students shouldn't stress perfection in college applications by Angel B. Perez, 2012. Many students experience intense pressure to be perfect in school, especially to ensure that they are accepted to a top university. But how important is a perfect college application? In this informational article, a dean of admissions discusses what colleges are really looking for and offers his surprising take on the importance of failure. As you read, take notes on the reasons why the author thinks students should be honest about their failures on college applications. I ask every student I interview for admission to my institution, Pitzer College, the same question. What do you look forward to the most in college? I was stunned and delighted recently when a student sat across from me at a Starbucks in New York City and replied, I look forward to the possibility of failure. Of course, that is not how most students respond to the question when sitting before the person who can make decisions about their academic futures, but this young man took a risk. You see, my parents have never let me fail, he said. When I want to take a chance at something, they remind me it's not a safe route to take. Taking a more rigorous course or trying an activity I may not succeed in, they tell me, will ruin my chances at college admission. Even the sacrifice of staying up late to do something unrelated to school, they see as a risk to my academic work and college success. I wish I could tell you this is an uncommon story, but kids all over the world admit they are under tremendous pressure to be perfect. When I was traveling in China last fall and asked a student what she did for fun, she replied, I thought I wasn't supposed to tell you that. I wouldn't want you to think I am not serious about my work. Students are usually in shock when I chuckle and tell them I never expect perfection. In fact, I prefer they not projected in their college applications. Of course, this goes against everything they've been told and makes young people uncomfortable. How could a dean of admission at one of America's most selective institutions not want the best and the brightest? The reality is, perfection doesn't exist, and we don't expect to see it in a college application. In fact, officers tend to be skeptical of students who present themselves as individuals without flaws. These days, finding imperfections in a college application is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Students try their best to hide factors they perceive to be negative and only tell us things they believe we will find impressive. This is supported by a secondary school culture where teachers are under pressure to give students nothing less than an A, and counselors are told not to report disciplinary infractions to colleges. Education agents in other countries are known to falsify student transcripts, assuming that an outstanding GPA is the ticket to admission. Colleges respond to culture shifts. The admission officers are digging deeper to find out who students really are outside of their trophies, medals, and test scores. We get the most excited when we read an application that seems real. It's so rare to hear stories of defeat and triumph that when we do, we cheer. If their perspectives are of lessons learned or challenges overcome, these applicants tend to jump to the top of the heap at highly selective colleges. We believe an error in high school should not define the rest of your life, but how you respond could shape you forever. I spent enough time in high schools to know teenagers will never be perfect. They do silly things, mess up, fall down, and lack confidence. The ability to bounce back is a fundamental life skill students have to learn on their own. The lessons of failure can't be taught in a classroom. They are experienced and reflected upon. During my weekend of interviews, another student told me, I'm ashamed to admit I failed pre-calculus, but I decided to take it again and got a B+. I'm now taking calculus, and even though I don't love it, I'm glad I pushed through. I asked him what he learned from the experience. I learned to let go of shame, he said. I realized that I can't let a grade define my success. I also learned that if you want anything bad enough, you can achieve it. I smiled as I wrote his words down on the application review form. This kid will thrive on my campus. Not only will the faculty love him, but he has the coping skills he needs to adjust to the rigors of life in a residential college setting. Failure is about growth, learning, overcoming, and moving on. Let's allow young people to fail. Not only will they learn something, it might even get them into college.
And that's it for today's lesson. For today's assignment, you guys just need to go to the to our Google Classroom, go to the classwork section of our Google Classroom, and open today's assignment. You'll answer some questions about today's lesson, and when you are finished, turn in your work. If you need any help at all with the assignment, feel free to email me at any time. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.